Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We begin in the name of the God whose mercy is profound, whose kindness is forever. Now, after having done verbs of past tense and present and future tense, Madi and Mudare, we will now proceed to do a few more variations, usages, so to say, of these verbs. One of the things that we ought to know is the passive verb, which is called fail majhool. Which is passive verb. That's what we use in every language, and obviously it's there in Arabic as well. In English, you say he beat up, and this is an active verb. But we also say he was beaten up, and this is passive verb. I'm sure we've already discussed it while talking about the possibility of the different Arab, when we are talking about the Arab where when you have Rafa, and the Rafa is on a noun because of the fact that it has a passive verb which is causing it to become a noun, to become naib fa'il. But now we will go into more detail of how passive verbs are formed in both cases, in the case of fail mazi as well as in the case of fail mudare. We already know the gardan now, so I don't need to write the different titles of the categories. I'll assume that you already know that there are 14 boxes of the gardan, the metrics. So we used to write, for example, our oft repeated verb daraba. He beat up. Now, when we are talking about the verb fail, which is past, madi, which is passive, majhool, so it's going to take a certain form. So obviously, when we used to say fail madi, it was given, assumed that it was fail mazi maruf, active. That was active, maruf. This one that we are doing is passive. So when we are doing fail madi majhool, dhuriba is going to change its form to become dhuriba. Daraba is going to, change its form to become dhuriba. And it is always going to be the same when it comes to past. The same form, dhuriba, when you're talking about two, it is going to be dhuriba, and when it's going to be jama, plural, it's going to be dhurebu. I'm sure that you already know that there is an alif added. And everything else is going to follow. Hopefully, you will do before me. Dhurebat instead of dharabat. Dhurebata instead of dharabata, and dhuribna instead of dharabna. Dhuribta instead of dharabta. When it was dharabta, it meant you beat up. When it's dhuribta, it means you were beaten up. It's dhuribata. pardon me, Zuribta, Zuribtuma. The two of you were beaten up. And Zuribtum, the many of you were beaten up. In case of maruf, it was Zarabta, Zarabtuma, Zarabtum. In case of passive, it's Zuribta, Zuribtuma, Zuribtum. You, one lady, were beaten up, Zuribti. The two of you, ladies, gents, or one lady, one gent, Zuribtuma. Many of you ladies were beaten up, Zuribtunna. May it never happen, but we're just practicing the verb. I was beaten up, Zuribtu. And we all were beaten up, Zuribna. Zuribna. Quite as simple as that. So this is the gardan of passive verbs when they are in the past tense. And as I said, it would always remain that way, the same way. You might wonder, why am I saying that, making that statement? Is it not true for all past verbs? Well, we have already seen that it's not true, that the verbs in the form of mazi fail, past tense, do not take exactly the same form, the same flow. Obviously, verbs would differ because of their letters, alphabets differing, because they carry different meanings. But it's not just the difference of letters, alphabets that we find in the case of past tense, fail mazi. We also know that sometimes a verb is like zaraba, sometimes it is like, let's say, something with a kasra in the second letter, and instead of zaraba, we therefore have to have samia, which is not like zaraba sama. And in rare cases, we may also have kathura, wherein the second letter has a dhamma, a pesh. So whether kathura, whether it's zaraba or whether it's samya, when it comes to passive verb, it will have only one form, which is kothera, zoreba, and somya. So it will never change, which is one very good positive thing about the majhul when it is in the mazi. And that is exactly the same case, same way when it is in the form of mudare. So I hope you understand what it means. No matter whatever be the verb, let's say instead of zaraba, we say shakara. He was thankful. If you make it shokera, so it would become he was thanked for. He was thanked for. When it is qatala, he killed. Qutila, he was killed, and so on. So passive verbs, when they are in the form of mazi fail, they will take this form. Now let's take the example of fail mudare. Fail mudare, which, as you've already seen, is both present and future as far as its potential possibility is concerned. When it comes to its application in the real life language usage of it, in almost all sentences, maybe a few rare exceptions apart, they would either mean present or future. Sometimes there are symbols, there are signs which would specify whether it's present or future, but in most cases it's going to be the context that would decide whether a verb used in the form of mudare is being used for the present tense or the future tense. But here we are practicing fail mudare majhul, passive. So the first one is, let's take the active first, yadribu, daraba yadribu. Yadribu means he is beating up or he will beat up. Or you want to say he is being beaten up, or he will beat up. So making it passive would require you to put a dhamma in the first letter, fatha in the third letter, yudrabu, and the job will be done. So in the case of mazi, it was dhureba. In case of mudare, it's yudrabu. And the rest follows without any changes, and I'm sure you will be able to do it comfortably. Yudrabani, yudrabuna. Tudrabu, you, one lady was beaten up or is being beaten up, shall be beaten up or is being beaten up. Tudrabu. Tudrabani and tudrabuna. Sorry, tudrabna. Tudrabna. Many of you shall be beaten up. Many of they shall be beaten up. Tudrabu, tudrabani, tudrabuni. This is third person. Now we are talking about second person, the one who is present. We're talking about masculine first. Tudrabu. You, one male, is going to be beaten up. Tudrabani. You, two males, are going to be beaten up. Tudrabuna. You, many men, are going to be beaten up. Tudrabina. You, one lady, are going to be beaten up. Obviously, I am doing it in the translation for future, but it could be equally relevant for present as well. Tudrabina. Tudrabani. You, two ladies, are going to be beaten up. And tudrabna. Tadrabina, tadribani, tadrabna. Tudrabna. Tadribu, tadribani, yadribna. Here it should have been yudrabna. That's what I was wondering. Where am I going wrong? Yes, it was yudrabna, and here it's tudrabna. Pardon me. Now, it's udrabu. I'm going to be beaten up, and nudrabu. We are going to be beaten up. If you're getting irritated as to why I'm not putting it up over there, well, it's because I hope that we've done it so many times that you already know that it's singular. This is two, tasniya, and this is jama. So, when we have this matrix kardan made up now, you know already that it's muzakkar, it's muannas, and it's a third person. This is muzakkar, muannas. This is second person, and this is first person for both genders. This is for you, fail mudari majhul. That is, the verb for the present and future tense, which is passive. Again, nothing different in any of the other verbs. Some verbs, well, many of them are the ones that we're going to do in the future, in the next subsequent lectures. There again you would find that even though verbs are capable of taking many different forms, but once you know the rule of making a verb passive, whether in the past or in the present future, whether in Madi or Mudare, you will be able to make passive verbs in any category of verbs, no matter whatever different forms they might take. That is, Zaraba would be Zoreba, and Yadribu would be Yuzrabu. So if I was to give you, this is something that you will study later, that if there is a verb in Arabic which is tadabbara, which we have not studied as yet. Tadabbara, when it's going to take the form of passive, a majhul, it's going to be tudubbira, like Zoreba. And yatadabbaru, which is going to be its muzare, will take the form of yutadabbaru. No change, it's the same pattern. The active verbs, the fail af'al which are maruf, will change. Tadabbara is a completely different form. But when it comes to passive, once you know the active form, the passive you will be able to make fairly easily. I just wanted to give you a flavor of what's going to follow. So we have done now what is fail majhul. There is only one other item on the table in the agenda that now we've got to do, which is what is called fail amr. Fail amr, which in English is imperative verb, but there's a difference. In Arabic, when you have fail amr, it's imperative order, command, as well as a request. So when we request God Almighty in our prayers, the verb that we use is fail amr. Obviously we've got no business to order him. We just request him very humbly. But in English, in order for an order to become a request, you've got many other things that you can possibly do. Please do it for me kindly, very kind of you. I'll be really obliged, and so on. In Arabic, well, when it comes to the simple form of verb, it's absolutely the same. It's the context that decides. Now, how do we make a fail amr? Now, let's be clear that when you are saying fail amr, you are ordering somebody, requesting someone. So it's happening right now. So past tense is ruled out. You're talking about the present or the future, which is fail muzare. Now, that's one thing. So when we're talking about fail amr, we're talking about fail muzare. And we are talking about fail amr, we are neither talking to somebody who's not present, nor are we talking to ourselves. We're talking to the person who is present, the one we are speaking to, the one we are communicating with. So in other words, when we're talking about fail amr, we are talking about the second person. So there are only 6 different categories of verbs, which are boxes of verbs which are involved. That is the second person, which is hadir and muzare. So let's say we are talking about our favorite verb, yadribu, yadribani. yadribuna. Tadribu. Sorry, because it's second person, it's tadribu, tadribani, and tadribuna, and tadribina, tadribani, and tadribna. Although I didn't make this mistake deliberately, it's sometimes good that one makes it while teaching so that the students are able to figure out that it really is not correct, and they're pointing out. I hope that some of you did feel that what I'm doing was wrong. Now, let's take this one first to find out how a fi'l amr is made. The simple formula is that when you have a fi'l mudari whose fi'l amr you are going to make, you will do two things. First, get rid of the letter that signifies fi'l mudari, which is ta. So get rid of it. And towards the end, remove the dhamma and put a jazm. The job is actually essentially done. However, there are going to be many cases like this one wherein you would find that the word is not pronounceable. You just can't pronounce it, because in Arabic, when you are beginning a word with a jazm on the first letter, it just cannot, it would not proceed. We would always need some vowel to begin. So, Urdu, which follows Arabic in its pattern, the way it's spoken, people, when they would use the word school, they would not be able to speak it. So they say, is school. They wouldn't say station. They would say, is station. Because they need a letter with a clear sound of vowel to begin a word. So likewise over here, you cannot pronounce it. You can't say zirb. You have to have something to begin with. So the idea is, the rule is that if it cannot be pronounced, you put an alif so that it is pronounceable with the use of some vowel. And obviously the immediate question that arises is, which of the three harakat are you going to use? Which of the three vowels? The rule is that you look at the middle letter, which is a ra here, and find out as to whether there is a kasra zir or a fatha zabar in it. If there is a kasra or a fatha, here in this case it's a kasra zir, you put a zir. But if it was a dhamma pesh, then alif would take pesh. That's what the rule is. So the rule is that you bring out the verb and you remove the ta and you put a jazm towards the end. If it is pronounceable, pronounce it. If it is not pronounceable, put an alif and then see as to whether the middle letter has a zir or a zabar, a kasra or a fatha, then put a kasra over here, zir. And if it has a dhamma, pesh, then put a dhamma over there. But obviously the job is not completely done. This is here, therefore, is rib, which is a command, beat up. If you want to say izrib him, beat him up, you would say izribhu, beat him up, which is a pronoun. So izrib. Now when it comes to two, the only difference is that instead of a jazm, you will remove the noon, idriba. Likewise over here, idribu. And we'll put a customary alif, which you already know. In this case, it's going to be noon again removed, and it's going to be now idribi. That's about it. Idribi. Idriba again, removing the noon at the end. The only exception is the Jama Muannas, wherein the noon doesn't get removed. It's idribna. Idribna would mean you all ladies beat up. Probably it's not removed, because had it been removed, then it would have been confused with idrib of the singular masculine form. So that's how it is. Idrib, idriba, idribu. Beat him up. The two of you beat him up or beat them up. The many of you beat up. The one lady you beat up. The two of you beat up, and the many of you beat up. That's how it is. I said that I mentioned actually two things which need to be mentioned, and hopefully we'll do more of it later when it will do the practice of it. But I need one more example wherein we don't have an alif with a kasra but with a fatha. So we say tansuru. You will help him. And I want to say help. You do the same thing. Remove ta, put a jazm, put an alif, and see here. Is it a dhamma? Then put a dhamma over here. Remember, in the middle letter, if there is a kasra or a fatha, you will put a kasra over here. And in case of dhamma, you will put a dhamma. So unsur. The rest is the same. Unsur, unsura, unsuru, unsuri, unsura, unsurna. Just two more things. One is an exception to this rule. The exception is that there is another form of verb which again you're going to study later. But let me introduce it here for you to be mentally prepared for it, as well as to let you know that, to give you the complete set of possibilities that are there in the case of making an imperative verb, fi'l amr. There is one peculiar form of verb in Arabic which has aslama as its mazi and yuslimu as its muzari. I'm not going to talk about it in detail about it, but just to give you an idea. Yuslimu will become tuslimu. And when this form comes, which we will study later, we will remove ta and we will put a jazm. And in this case, although the second letter has a kasra, you'll put an alif and it will have a fatha on top of it, and it will say aslim instead of islim. This is an exception. This is what we are going to study later, this particular category of verb amongst many others. But just to give you an understanding that this is an exception. Just one more example, and hopefully the discussion would be almost complete. And that is another category wherein you have a verb in the mazi allama, he taught, and the muzari is yu'allimu. Again, there is something you will study later when we will talk about thalasi mazid fi. What exactly is it? You'll learn later. Yu'allimu, he is teaching or he will teach, will take the form of tu'allimu, you are teaching or you'll teach. But when you want to make a fi'l amr of it, you will remove the and have a jazm at the end, and you know what? You will be able to pronounce it. Allim. So allim means teach. you will not need the help of an alif to begin with, at the beginning, because alif was added to make the word pronounceable. If by going through the operation of fail amr, removing ta and putting a jazm at the end, the word itself is pronounceable. You don't need the help of alif. So it's allim, allima, allimu, allimi, allima, allimna. This was fail amr. Today we did fail mazi majhul, fail muzari majhul, and fail amr. May the Almighty enable us to understand the language of His book, so that we are able to understand His book properly, understanding it by reading the text of the Quran directly.